All right, so get ready because today we're diving into some pretty wild stuff.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be taking a close look at Elon Musk
Okay.
and his connections to some far-right movements that are popping up all around the world.
Interesting.
We've got reports from the Atlantic Wired, some audio clips,
Wow.
even a piece from The Guardian.
Oh, okay.
It's a lot to unpack, but that's what we do here.
Yeah, so it really jumps out is how these connections,
Right.
they aren't just like isolated things. It's
Yeah.
like a pattern, especially on X.
Right.
It seems like he's really promoting far-right voices.
Yeah, it's not just here a retweet there.
Yeah.
It feels way more deliberate.
Yeah.
And, speaking of deliberate, one of the articles we're looking at dives into this movement
Okay.
called the New Apostolic Reformation,
Uh-huh.
NAR for short. Stephanie McCrumman wrote about it for The Atlantic.
Interesting.
And it is some intense stuff.
Like what?
They want to, establish a kingdom of God here on earth. And their tactics to do that are, let's just say they're interesting.
Really?
Yeah, it's not your typical Sunday service, that's for sure.
Okay.
They have these prayer gatherings, and they literally demon map cities.
Demon map cities.
Yeah, they pinpoint areas that they believe are under, demonic influence.
Interesting tactic.
They anoint voters with frankincense oil.
With what?
Frankincense oil.
Wow.
They call these voters, God's army.
Okay.
And the rhetoric that they use is very fiery.
God.
And Crumman even talks about how she was asked to be prayed over.
Really?
Yeah, because of her work as a journalist,
Huh.
which is kind of wild.
Wow.
But what's really fascinating is that Musk himself
Okay.
has been seen at an NAR church,
Oh, wow.
Life Center in Harrisburg.
Huh. So what do you make of that?
It's a very curious connection.
Yeah.
You have this tech mogul who's all about, innovation in the future.
Right.
And he's aligning himself with this movement that seems to draw heavily on traditional religious beliefs and wants to reshape society.
Yeah.
That's a head-scratcher.
It really makes you wonder what's motivating him here.
Mhm.
Is this a genuine spiritual thing, or is there something more strategic going on?
Right.
And it's interesting, too, because he's also been very public with his support of Germany's AfD party,
Oh, yeah, the AfD.
which is like a whole other thing.
Yeah, they're a far-right party.
Right.
They're very anti-immigrant,
Uh-huh.
and there are some connections to neo-Nazi groups there.
Right. And so for him to endorse them, especially when Germany is dealing with its own political and social challenges, is very controversial.
Yeah.
He's essentially given them a global platform and a legitimacy that they wouldn't have otherwise.
That's true.
And there's this anecdote in one of the articles about Alice Weidel.
Okay.
She's one of the AfD leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually thanked Musk for his support in a video.
Wow.
And it's not just the AfD.
Ah,
He's also gone after the UK's Labour Party leader, Keir Starmer.
really?
Yeah, he even called for the release of Tommy Robinson.
Oh, a British far-right activist with a history of pretty hateful rhetoric.
So it seems like he's not just watching these far-right movements, he's actively engaging with them,
Exactly.
boosting their profiles, echoing their talking points.
Right. And speaking of boosting profiles, we need to talk about Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of him.
There's a really great profile on him in The Atlantic by Ali Breland.
Uh-huh.
And it highlights how Kirk has become this kingmaker of the right.
Interesting.
He connects mainstream conservative thought with its more extreme fringes.
Okay.
Kirk's organization, Turning Point USA, started out as kind of a standard conservative youth group,
Right.
but it's become way more influential.
So what are they doing differently?
They're really pushing this Christian nationalist agenda,
Okay.
promoting conspiracy theories like the Great Replacement Theory,
Oh, wow.
and attacking figures like Martin Luther King Jr.
Seriously.
Yeah, and they're doing it in a way that really appeals to young people.
Which is scary.
Yeah, Breland talks about this Turning Point event
Mm-hmm.
where Kirk just laughed off criticism from white nationalists.
Wow.
It's alarming to see how these extreme views are becoming normalized.
Yeah, it feels very calculated.
Right.
They know young people are disillusioned with politics,
Huh?
and they're offering this simple black and white worldview that promises to restore order.
Yeah, a return to traditional values.
Exactly.
So we have this potent mix of Musk's Platform X amplifying far-right voices.
Right.
These movements gaining traction around the world.
Yeah.
And figures like Charlie Kirk shaping the next generation of conservative thinkers.
That's a lot.
It really is, and it raises a lot of questions.
Like what?
What's causing this shift towards the far right?
Yeah.
Why are figures like Musk so drawn to these movements?
Right.
And what does all of this mean for democracy and global politics?
Big questions.
Big questions. And these are all things we'll be exploring more deeply as we continue our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so before we get into those deeper questions, I want to step back for a second
All right.
and focus on one particular aspect of all of this that I think is really relevant,
Okay.
and that's the role of religion,
Religion.
specifically Christian nationalism in all of this.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's an important point to bring up.
It's not just some fringe belief system anymore.
No.
It's become a major force in American politics and culture,
Right.
and understanding its influence is key to understanding why figures like Musk might be aligning themselves with these movements.
It's true, and I think for a lot of people outside the U.S., the concept of Christian nationalism is kind of baffling,
Yeah,
but it's a real thing here,
it is.
and it's impacting our politics in a big way.
I think a lot of people have this image of American Christianity as being fairly moderate,
Yeah.
focused on individual salvation, personal faith.
Uh-huh.
But what we're seeing now is something different.
Yeah.
It's more militant,
Yeah.
more assertive.
It sees America as a nation chosen by God, and it believes that Christianity should play a big role in our laws and our government.
You're hitting on some really important points there.
Okay, good.
This idea that America has a special destiny ordained by God
Mm-hmm.
is a major part of Christian nationalist thought.
Right. They believe America was founded as a Christian nation,
Exactly.
and they think our laws and institutions should reflect that.
And they see any attempt to separate church and state
Yeah.
or to promote pluralism and tolerance of other faiths as an attack on their identity and their values.
Right, and that's when things get dangerous because
Yeah.
it creates this us versus them mentality.
Exactly.
Anyone who doesn't share their beliefs is the enemy.
Right, a threat to America itself.
Exactly, and that kind of thinking can be really easily exploited by extremists.
Oh,
We
absolutely.
just want to divide everyone.
And we see this playing out in the rhetoric of figures like Charlie Kirk,
Oh, yeah.
who are constantly talking about globalists and secular humanists
Right.
and other perceived enemies of Christian America.
They're tapping into people's fears and anxieties,
Yeah.
and they're using that for their own political gain.
And that's where Musk comes in.
Right.
He's not just observing this,
No.
he's engaging with it.
Yeah, he's promoting people like Kirk. He's appearing at those NAR churches.
Right.
He's using his platform to amplify these voices.
Exactly. And it's a very deliberate strategy.
It is.
And it's working. By aligning himself with this movement, he's tapping into a very powerful force in American society.
And he's doing it at a time when Christian nationalism is already on the rise.
Yeah.
There's this perfect storm brewing, you know.
Right. Economic anxieties, cultural shifts, political polarization.
It's all feeding into it.
So it's like he's found this perfect storm of discontent.
Yeah.
And he's riding that wave.
It makes you wonder what his end game is.
Right? Is it to boost his businesses, promote his libertarian ideology?
Right.
Maybe he even has some kind of messianic complex.
Who knows? But the impact is undeniable.
Yeah,
He's
but-
giving legitimacy to this movement. That goes against the values that a lot of Americans believe in.
It feels like we're at a turning point.
It does.
The choices we make now,
Yeah.
the narratives we embrace,
Uh-huh.
the leaders we follow.
They're going to determine the future of America.
It's a lot of pressure.
It is. And I think it's important for people to understand what's at stake here,
Right.
to see the connections and to recognize the potential consequences of this far-right surge.
Because if we don't, we risk losing something very precious.
What's that?
The very soul of our nation.
That's a powerful statement.
Well, that's a sobering thought.
It is.
We've covered a lot today,
We have.
but there's still so much more to talk about.
I agree.
I think we need to take a break,
Okay.
come back with fresh minds, and really delve into what all of this means for the future.
Sounds like a plan. So last time we were talking about this big question.
Yeah.
Why is Elon Musk, this guy who's all about progress and innovation, why is he supporting these far-right movements?
It doesn't seem to make sense at first.
It really doesn't.
On the one hand, you have this guy who's all about electric cars and space travel and pushing the boundaries of technology.
Right.
And then you see him hanging out with groups that seem, well, kind of stuck in the past.
It's a strange mix.
It really is.
I mean, it's easy to just say, oh, that's just Musk being Musk.
Right.
You know, provocative, unpredictable, maybe even a little trollish.
Uh-huh.
But I think there's more to it than that.
Okay, so let's dig into that a little bit.
Okay.
What are some of the theories about what's really motivating him here?
Well, one idea that comes up a lot is that Musk is, at his core, a libertarian.
Libertarian. Okay.
He's always been a big advocate for less government regulation,
Right.
more individual freedom, a hands-off approach to business.
Uh-huh.
And that aligns pretty well with the far right's anti-establishment, anti-globalist views.
So it's about dismantling existing power structures
Yeah,
and creating a world that's more in line with his own vision.
I think so.
A world where innovation and entrepreneurship can thrive without being held back by bureaucracy.
Exactly. And that vision probably includes very little regulation.
Especially when it comes to technology.
Especially when it comes to technology, and the far right, especially in the US, is totally on board with that.
Right. They see government intervention as the enemy of freedom.
And prosperity.
Okay, but here's the thing that I don't quite understand.
Yeah.
Wouldn't a world governed by Christian nationalist principles,
Okay.
with its focus on traditional values and religious authority,
Yeah,
wouldn't that actually be more restrictive, not less?
that's a good point.
How does that fit with Musk's libertarian beliefs?
It's a bit of a puzzle, isn't it?
It is.
It's possible that Musk doesn't see those two things as being in conflict.
So maybe he thinks that a society that's based on traditional values could actually be better for innovation?
As long as the government stays out of it.
So it's about finding the right balance.
Exactly. Freedom from government interference, but within a framework of moral and social order.
And that's where the appeal of Christian nationalism comes in.
Right. It offers that framework, that sense of order and stability that people crave.
Especially in a world that feels so chaotic and uncertain.
Exactly.
Okay, but then there's this whole kingdom of God idea
Right.
that the NAR promotes.
Mhm.
It's not just about influencing policy,
No, it's about totally transforming society.
replacing secular government with religious rule.
That's a pretty radical idea.
How does that fit into Musk's worldview?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
Maybe he genuinely believes in the NAR's vision.
Okay.
Or maybe he sees them as a way to achieve his own goals.
So like a powerful force that can help him dismantle the deep state.
And reshape the world according to his own libertarian principles.
So it's either a genuine spiritual connection or a strategic alliance.
Or maybe a bit of both.
It's hard to know for sure.
It really is.
But regardless of what's really going on in his head,
Yeah.
the consequences of his actions are clear. By supporting these movements and amplifying their voices on his platform, he's legitimizing their ideas
Giving them global reach.
and emboldening them to act.
And that's where things get really worrying.
Right, because now we're not just talking about abstract ideas.
No, we're talking about real-world impacts.
On politics, on society, on democracy itself.
You're absolutely right. And I think it's important to consider those potential impacts.
Right.
If we're seeing a global shift toward the far right,
Uh-huh.
fueled in part by people like Musk,
Yeah.
what does that mean for democracies around the world?
I mean, we're already seeing these movements gaining ground in the U.S. and Europe.
Right.
The AfD in Germany, the Brexit movement in the UK.
The rise of far-right figures in France,
Right.
Italy.
It's a scary trend.
It really is. And one of the biggest concerns is the erosion of democratic norms and institutions.
Right, because the far right often operates with this us versus them mentality.
Exactly. They
Wow.
demonize their opponents.
They undermine trust in the system.
They see compromise as weakness.
And they often resort to inflammatory rhetoric or even violence to get what they want.
And that's something we're seeing play out on X very clearly.
Right, with Musk's free speech absolutism.
It's basically created a breeding ground for misinformation, hate speech, conspiracy theories.
It's like the Wild West of the internet.
Anything goes.
The loudest, most aggressive voices win.
And that kind of environment is toxic for democracy.
Right, because democracy depends on informed citizens.
Engaging in reasoned debate.
But if we can't agree on basic facts,
If we're constantly bombarded with misinformation and propaganda,
how can we make good decisions about the future?
it's like we're living in parallel universes,
Each side trapped in its own echo chamber,
fueled by algorithms that just tell us what we want to hear.
whether it's true or not.
And that's exactly what the far right wants.
Chaos and confusion.
They understand that controlling the narrative is key.
And platforms like X, with their huge reach.
Are the perfect tools for that?
So it's not just about what Musk believes personally. It's about the platform he's built.
And the power it has.
He might call himself a champion of free speech,
But he's created a system that favors certain voices.
especially those that agree with him.
And that has real consequences for everyone.
Absolutely. And those consequences go beyond just online chatter.
Right, we're seeing this online extremism spill over into the real world,
It's influencing elections,
shaping public policy.
even inciting violence.
The January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol is a perfect example of that.
Right, even though Musk might condemn those kinds of actions.
His platform helped create the conditions that made them possible.
And it's not just about physical violence either.
No, the far right also wants to weaken democratic institutions from the inside.
By stacking the courts, suppressing voting rights, attacking the free press.
They know that controlling the levers of power is essential.
So it's not just about winning elections.
It's about changing the rules of the game entirely.
They're playing the long game.
And they'll use any means necessary to achieve their goals.
Whether it's through voting or the courts or even violence.
And figures like Musk are helping them whether they realize it or not.
It's scary to think about.
It is. That's why it's so important to understand what's happening.
To see the connections.
And to recognize the potential consequences of this far-right surge.
Because if we don't,
we could end up in a future that none of us want.
Okay, so we've talked about the global consequences.
Yeah.
But let's focus on the U.S. for a minute.
Okay.
We talked about the rise of Christian nationalism earlier.
Right.
But I think it's worth digging into that a bit more.
I agree.
Especially given Musk's interest in this movement.
It's a crucial part of the story.
It really feels like America is at a crossroads.
It does.
And the decisions we make now will have a huge impact on the future of our democracy.
You're absolutely right. Christian nationalism is not just some fringe belief anymore.
No, it's become mainstream.
And understanding its influence is key to understanding why figures like Musk might be aligning themselves with these movements.
I think it's important to explain this for people who might not be familiar with it.
Yeah, because for a lot of people outside the U.S., the idea of Christian nationalism might seem strange or even scary.
But it's a very real phenomenon here in America.
And it's having a huge impact on our politics.
So we've spent the last couple parts of this deep dive looking at some pretty intense stuff.
We have.
The rise of the far-right Christian nationalism, Elon Musk getting involved. It can feel kind of overwhelming, honestly.
It's definitely a lot to process. It's a complex situation and concerning for sure. But I think it's important to remember that we're not powerless. We can actually do something. We have choices. We can take action and hopefully shape a better future.
You're right. It's easy to get caught up in all the negativity and feel like things are just spiraling out of control.
Right.
But we have a responsibility to be informed, to engage, to fight back against these dangerous trends.
I totally agree. And I think it starts with understanding the power of information. The more we know about these movements, their goals, their strategies, the better prepared we are to resist them.
One thing that's really stood out to me through all of this is how this whole battle is about information.
Yeah.
The far right, especially online, is really good at spreading misinformation.
Oh, absolutely.
They manipulate the narrative. They create these echo chambers where extreme views can just thrive.
It's a classic strategy. Divide and conquer, sow distrust and chaos, undermine people's faith in institutions.
And they're using the internet to do it.
Of course, social media algorithms, targeted advertising.
It's all designed to spread their message and recruit followers.
Exactly.
And that brings us back to Musk's platform X.
Yeah.
It's basically become a breeding ground for conspiracy theories, hate speech, straight up propaganda.
And because he presents himself as this free speech absolutist, he can deflect any criticism by saying he's just defending people's right to express themselves.
It's a convenient shield.
It is, but it's a very selective kind of free speech. He's quick to ban critics while giving far-right figures who spread lies and incite violence a free pass.
It's a dangerous double standard.
It really is.
It feels like we're constantly overloaded with information.
Yeah.
So much noise that it's hard to know what to believe.
And that's what they want.
The chaos and confusion.
Exactly. They thrive in that environment.
So how do we fight back against that?
It's tough, but I think we have to be more critical consumers of information.
Okay.
Question everything. Fact check. Don't just believe things at face value.
Especially when it comes from sources that have a clear agenda.
Exactly. We also need to be aware of those echo chambers.
Yeah.
Those online spaces where we only see information that reinforces what we already believe.
Right.
We need to actively seek out different perspectives.
Even if they make us uncomfortable.
Even if they make us uncomfortable, we should also support organizations that are fighting misinformation and promoting media literacy. There are groups out there doing really important work.
Right. They fact-check news stories, debunk conspiracy theories, teach people how to navigate the online world safely.
We need more of that.
We can't just hope someone else will fix this for us.
No, we have to be active participants in this fight for truth and democracy.
And that means being responsible about the information we consume.
Yes, and sharing accurate information.
Right, amplifying the voices of reason and sanity.
And it's not just about online activism.
Okay.
It's about getting involved in our communities, having difficult conversations.
With people who might disagree with us.
Trying to build bridges and find common ground.
I know, it can feel really hard to have those conversations right now.
It is.
Especially with how divided things are.
Yeah.
But they're more important than ever.
They are.
We can't just retreat into our own little bubbles.
Yeah.
We have to try to understand where other people are coming from.
Even if we don't agree with them.
Exactly. Empathy and listening are crucial.
They really are. We might not change anyone's mind overnight, but at least we can create a space for dialogue and understanding.
And that's a start.
It is.
And I think it's important to remember that we're not alone in this.
Definitely not.
There are so many people around the world who are fighting for democracy, for social justice.
For a better future.
We have to connect with each other, support each other, lift each other up.
There's power in collective action.
Right. We can't let the forces of hate and division win.
We can't.
We have to hold on to hope. We have to believe that a better future is possible.
I love that.
And we have to fight for it every single day.
Every single day.
So where do we go from here?
Well, I think the first thing is to stay informed.
Okay.
Keep learning about these issues.
Yeah.
Read trustworthy news sources.
Yeah.
Follow experts and organizations that are fighting extremism.
Okay.
And don't just consume information, share it.
Right.
Talk to your friends and family about what you're learning.
Yeah, get involved in your community.
Absolutely. Volunteer for organizations that align with your values.
Support candidates who will fight for the things you believe in.
Exactly.
And most importantly, don't give up.
I agree.
This is a long fight.
It is.
And it's going to be difficult.
It will be.
But it's a fight worth having.
It is. The stakes are too high. The future of our world depends on it.
That's a powerful way to put it.
We all have a role to play.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap things up.
Yeah.
This has been a really intense but important conversation.
It has.
And I hope our listeners feel inspired to take action.
Me too.
To make a difference in their own communities and in the world.
We can all be part of the solution.
That's a wrap on this deep dive into Elon Musk and the rise of the far right. Remember, you've gotten way more information about this than you would from a typical news story or podcast. Keep learning. Keep asking questions. And as always, thanks for diving in with us.